saturated with content yet, with information? Still have good energy? Oh, let me test this. Everyone just please get up for a second. Get up for a minute. Get a good stretch. Raise your arms above your head. Take a deep breath. Great. I want to make sure there's more space in your brain by providing more oxygen so I can share with you what I want to share with you today. So I think Andre kind of captured it pretty well this morning when he talked about you can't create great places without focusing on people. And can we get the first slide, please? Is this thing working? Oops. Let's see. Go back for a second. Okay. So as an urbanist and as a public space designer, I've spent a lot of time thinking about great public space design. This session is focused on place. But as I said, you really can't start thinking about great space design, great placemaking, until you really focus on people and public life. Okay, there we go. So the way I think about public life is the social activity that takes place in everyday public spaces, on streets, on parks and plazas, and the spaces between buildings. Public life is it's this. It's like yoga happening in Market Square. It's also, sorry, this thing's moving a little slowly. It's also taking a run in Point State Park, so solo experiences in the public realm. It's the great gatherings that happen when people are walking from downtown to one of the stadia, walking across the bridges in Pittsburgh, and all the people that you encounter on the way. But it's also the everyday experiences, going shopping, going to the farmer's market, the people you encounter on your walk or your bike or your transit ride to work. It happens in community, but it also happens, sometimes it's quiet times, quiet places, just the act of kind of observing and people watching in a beautiful public space like Point State Park. It's planned events, so the activities that the cities, that the partnerships plan and program for us, but it's really about the kind of informal, everyday social interactions that occur in places that aren't planned for, the kind of spontaneous interactions. It's about what we love to do when we're invited out to go to events and programming and events that are happening in our city, but it's also what we have to do. So it's the optional activities that we do when we leave our homes or our workplaces, but it's also these kind of everyday experiences of taking the bus to work, taking transit, driving to work, whatever it is. It's the kind of necessary activities that get us out into the public realm. It helps. Vibrant public life occurs when people are the focus, but sometimes it just happens anyway. It's part of what it means to be part of an urban resident and living in cities. Another way that we think about public life is it's what a collective group of people do when they live their lives outside of their home, their workplace, and their car. So we, as a country, as a nation, we've been spending the last 50 years investing a heck of a lot of resources into our private lives. So spending time and investing in our backyards, or in our private automobiles, in our roadways, or in our beautiful gleaming office towers, or more so today, the time that we spend in social media and our smartphones. Just to be clear, this is not part of public life. And so why is this important? You might think that, well, public life is it's a sort of nice to have kind of experience, but I want to share with you today some research which points to public life being core to whether you're in community development, whether you're interested in healthy cities, whether you're interested in sustainable cities. Public life, focusing on public life can really help you achieve outcomes in any one of those areas. A few pieces of research I want to share. So it used to be that, cancer, heart disease were some of the biggest killers. Now across the globe, there's 5 million people are dying annually from physical inactivity. It turns out that the kind of basics of our neighborhood design, so the amount of intersections, the population density, access to transit and parks, just those basic components of your neighborhood alone invite you to do an hour and a half more physical activity a day. This is before you even think about going to the gym. So the basics of our neighborhood urban design can be a real factor in our physical health. There's a 30% increase of early mortality among socially isolated people. So elders who don't have the choice to socialize in a public space, to meet one-on-one, who have to drive to get to a cup of milk, we're often seeing an increase of mortality among socially isolated folks. Elders who live in walkable communities show fewer declines in mental acuity and Alzheimer's. So again, good urban design, walkable streets are critical for our mental health. How many folks commute an hour or more to work a day? Can I see a show of hands? Not that many people in this room. That's great. Okay. Well, what if I told you that by reducing your commute time an hour, it would give you the same equivalent of happiness as a 40% pay increase? So again, the jobs housing balance can really contribute to quality of life and happiness and well-being. This is a big one. I think Mayor Schaaf touched on this when she talked about bringing her, the desk out into the public realm and encountering someone very, very different from her, with a very different opinion from her. We've been working a lot in the city of San Jose, where they're trying to figure out how can we turn our diversity into a strength. And the way to turn diversity into strength is by people encountering one another in public space, in the public realm frequently. Research shows that when there's changes in a community in terms of a demographic, and either a new population shows up, the initial response is prejudice. The initial response is fear. But over long-term continual interactions, that fear begins to decrease and tolerance increases. This only happens if you have a chance to kind of have that daily experience with people who are different from you, and that only happens if you have a public realm to spend time in. I think we all know the story about eyes on the street, safety and security, walkable communities, people who are connected to streetscape, have safer communities. The Knight Foundation did a study of what are the three things which are important for attachment to people's communities, and it turns out they're social offerings. Openness and aesthetics really create community attachment, and we know that cities people love have much stronger well-being and economic growth. Secondly, we're learning that now transportation tops power generation as the top source of CO2 emissions, and we know that walkable human-scale developments with high jobs and quality public transit could help Pittsburgh reduce its CO2 emissions by 1/3. So again, walkable streets, walkable communities, great urban design, great public realm contribute to important sustainability outcomes. And then finally, there's been, with this current generation, they're calling the I generation, people who were born, since the creation of smartphones in 2007, are spending more time on their smartphones in the rooms, less time going out to meeting friends. It turns out that this generation is having less sex, and they're a lot safer. So on some hand, that might be considered a good thing, but actually it's creating a great deal of social isolation and depression. So it's really critical that we create invitations, that it's safe to spend time, and we create those invitations for people to spend time with their friends, get outside. It turns out that weak social connections have health effects similar to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. So spending time with your friends, actually getting out and socializing is a critical part of social cohesion and avoiding depression. What are the key ingredients for public life, to great public life? Well, you have to have density, which Pittsburgh has. You have to have a decent public realm, and then you have to have the invitations, the programming, and the care, and the stewardship to make it work. Pittsburgh has a lot of these things going on very, very well. And in fact, it turns out that the more our cities look like the urban model shown in Wakanda in Black Panther, the closer we will get actually to creating vibrant public life. Well, how's Pittsburgh doing in terms of public life? Well, we were invited a couple years ago by Sean Luther and Envision Downtown, which is a partnership between the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and the mayor's office, Mayor Peduto. Envision is now led by, has new leadership with Chris Watts. They're doing great stuff. We were invited to do a public space, public life survey in downtown Pittsburgh. What is the existing life profile in the Golden Triangle? We worked with about 50 volunteers. How many folks, any folks out there were part of this survey, actually? Okay, great. It looks like a number of folks were part of the survey. 50 volunteers from planning, public works, from people, interested students. Great turnout. We looked at both public space downtown and public life. We looked at a number of different sites downtown, including transportation and movement corridors and some of the bigger open spaces. Some of the more historic open space resources like Mellon Square and some of the newer ones like Market Square. And here's what we found. We found that the downtown looks like a CBD, big surprise. There's a big peak of life during the lunch hour, and then it begins to really taper off after 5 or 6 p.m. So people are coming downtown, going to work, which is great, and then they're going home. On the weekend, people aren't coming downtown, which means that really people are only here for necessary activities. The predominant kind of life profile we're seeing in downtown is people coming into work and then not choosing to spend any time after work or coming in on the weekends unless there's a major event. There's no network that supports everyday cycling, so you have this great connection, and you've got the Penn Avenue bike road, which is great, but actually throughout Pittsburgh, very tight street network, there's not a whole lot of opportunities for everyday cycling and movement. We found that downtown is full of adults, big surprise if it's a big daytime working population. I think there's about 100,000 workers come into downtown every day. It's mostly adults. This is an indicator to us that the Golden Triangle is not a mixed-use neighborhood. It's really primarily serving the kind of worker community and not as much a kind of a 24/7 neighborhood. We also found that on Liberty Avenue in particular, between 30 and 85% of the people spending time on Liberty Avenue were standing waiting for the bus. So this means that that street could be doing a much better job of both serving those transit passengers by providing a place to sit, but secondly, that the other offerings on that street aren't as compelling in terms of getting people to spend time and enjoy some of the offerings in downtown. What were some of the public space highlights? We found that downtown has a discontinuous pedestrian network. So when I talked about those 3 intersecting triangles about the necessary conditions to create great public life, you have to have great public space, you have to have the population density, you also have to have a very good, basic public realm. What's shown here in the blue is where you've got decent sidewalks. What's shown in the red is where the pavement is crumbling. So, Pittsburgh is a world-class city. Right now, it does not have a world-class public realm, and these things are not expensive. There's more work to do downtown, and you can start by something very simple, very basic as fixing the sidewalks and making downtown a great place to walk and spend time. Secondly, this is an example of the good, fair, and poor paving conditions. Secondly, we looked at facade quality. So where there are a lot of rhythm of facades and openings and shops and storefronts, we found that the areas in blue have pretty vibrant facades. It means that they're interesting places to spend time, that you might enjoy your walk from the bus stop to your office. But the red areas are where there's inactive facades, vacant lots, and generally not very pleasant places to stay in the downtown. There's some examples. We also found that there's a bit of a public space, public life mismatch. We looked at Mellon Square on an average day, and they both have about the same amount of seating, about in the range of 200 public seats, including the public benches. But in Mellon Square on an average day, we found about 22 people an hour spending time. Whereas in Market Square, we found over 100 people spending time. So how can we better tune our investments? We've got limited dollars to spend on public realm investment. How do we fine-tune our investments to create the type of space, the type of programming, the type of activity that are going to support what Pittsburghers want to do when they're spending time in public space? So the things we learned about the Golden Triangle, it's a thriving business district, which is great. It's kind of the job center, the thriving heart of the kind of Pittsburgh economy. There's great major recent investments like PNC Plaza. It's a multimodal transit hub, so this is something that Pittsburgh is doing really well. 54% of people are using transit to get to work. That's an incredibly high number for a U.S. city, and you should all be very proud of the fact that you're utilizing the transit network in Pittsburgh. One of the things that other cities around the country would really die for is this really fine-grained block network, nicely scaled walkable downtown blocks and some beautiful architecture. And then great open spaces. There's 45% of the space downtown is public realm, public space. There's a great culture of public life, particularly during big events. And downtown is becoming more mixed use. There's 300 restaurants. There's more on the way. There's 1,000 students in some of the local universities. There's a growing residential population. There's 12,000 people currently live downtown, and I think there's another 4,000 units on the way. That's critical for downtown becoming more of a 24/7 mixed-use urban center. In comparison, the city of Vancouver has about 100,000 downtown residents. They are truly a 24/7 downtown in a very vibrant and mixed-use neighborhood, and Pittsburgh is on the way to doing that. What we know about Pittsburgh is this growth can be shared by everyone. Pittsburgh is third on the list of opportunity for intergenerational economic mobility. So there's a great possibility for, if you're in Pittsburgh, you can rise up the economic ladder. Pittsburgh has one of the world's best bus stops. I think this might have been a sort of accident of fate, where there's a couple bus stops next to Cots Plaza. There's great public art, there's beautiful trees, there's seating. This is like really one of the world's best bus stops, but also has some of the worst. So I don't know how many of you have experienced this on Liberty Avenue. It's narrow sidewalks, it's crowded. There's a lot of transit lines moving down Liberty, and there's a conflict between people who are wanting to spend time waiting for their bus and the people who are trying to pass through. That's not an issue about transit riders or people trying to pass through. It's an issue about the public realm. It needs to be generous enough to accommodate both of those users in an elegant and in a dignified way. And Envision is doing a lot to solve this problem. We also saw that some of the public spaces downtown are quite congested, whereas others are fairly empty. This is the Heinz Plaza. I think it's open during lunchtime, but could that space better serve, and be part of this kind of expanded network, public realm network downtown? It seems like the streets are trying to do too many things at the same time. I know that Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, the Planning Department, and Public Works are really working hard to solve this problem. How do you get the best performance out of this really kind of tight grid network, tight street network downtown? And so our prescription was the following. These are some big vision ideas. What would it take to get Pittsburgh to have 80% transit ridership by 2030? Wouldn't that be incredible? You're already at 54%. You could be the U.S.'s best model in terms of transit adoption. And I think the way that's possible with the new director of the Port Authority and the director of Mobility and Infrastructure all working together. Second piece is making room for people. So what if we could eliminate some of the parking structures that are in the downtown and move them to the periphery, where people who, it's still necessary to drive in. I think half of the population is still driving in to get to jobs downtown. If you could park on the periphery, so then you could walk into the middle, make better use of that downtown space, redevelop for housing, for commercial offerings. There's already been a lot of effort on connecting to the waterfront, making Pittsburgh a world-class waterfront city. But I think there's some still work to do in terms of making Pittsburgh a complete neighborhood. People will spend time if there's opportunities to shop, to get groceries, to take care of everyday needs, and to go out for entertainment and events. There's a little bit missing in terms of the Golden Triangle forming or functioning as a complete neighborhood. But I think the key is about making it people first. So again, great public space design starts with focusing on people. We want to flip the triangle in terms of space allocation for single occupancy vehicle trips to prioritizing pedestrians. And that really starts with this very humble and basic thing of making great sidewalks. After doing the public life study downtown, we were invited to come back to focus a bit more on Liberty Avenue and to kind of turn some of these recommendations into action. We started looking at Liberty Avenue, and we learned that in terms of the use patterns on Liberty, there's about 1,200 vehicles at peak hour. There's 6,000 bus riders, and there's 2,000 pedestrians, but the space allocation patterns don't align with those use patterns. So we started looking at, well, how can we flip the script a little bit on Liberty to better accommodate the people who are already there? So what would it look like to add 11 feet to the sidewalks and create dedicated bus lanes? What would it look like to take the existing conditions today and turn that into, in a pilot way, in a temporary way, to expand room for pedestrians, to maybe reduce or eliminate some of the parking with maintaining the loading, and again accommodate the people that are already there in a generous and a dignified way, starting with pilots and then moving towards a more permanent space design. As I said, Envision is providing really strong leadership on this. Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, the Planning Department, Public Works, all working together to not wait 10 years, but let's start this today. They're already at work doing this stuff, striping bus lanes, adding temporary sidewalk extensions. Apparently the bus operators love this, the dedicated busways. People are already spending time in this new public spaces. This used to be the experience of waiting for the bus on Liberty Avenue. This is what it's like now. And this is just the beginning. There's a lot more which is being rolled out on Liberty Avenue, and the hope is that we can take the lessons, learn downtown, and begin to apply those lessons across the rest of Pittsburgh, reach out into the neighborhoods. Because we can learn a lot of lessons from downtown. So maybe you're not, you're not as interested, or you're not in the field of architecture or urbanism or planning, and this stuff doesn't appeal to you, but you still realize and understand the value of public life. I want to challenge you. What can you personally do today, right now, to foster public life in Pittsburgh? I have a very simple prescription. Turn off your phone, put it away, put it in your pocket, go outside, look at someone in the eye and smile, and talk to a stranger. Very simple, very simple. I'm John Bela. Thank you very much.